Helen, thank you ever
Hi.
so much for coming on to the Untypical OT podcast. It's lovely to have you here. This series is about Are You the Perfect Parent? We had a little kind of intro to you and what you do and what your job is about. But the first question that I kick off with everybody in through the doors before they get comfortable is, are you the perfect parent, Helen?
Do you know, it's funny really because I have realized over the years that I am probably an incurable perfectionist,
Yep.
which is it's okay up to a point, I think. And I think you get to this point in your life, you have a certain amount of control, don't you? As you're going through with school and career, there are always things that are outside of your control. Um, and I think that I also probably the perfectionism was a reaction to my ADHD, which I didn't know I had at the
Yeah.
time, to compensate for that. And somehow I was managing to keep most of the balls in the air. And I actually also I was a bit of an older mum when I got pregnant. And I was so happy to have got pregnant. I just wanted to do everything right.
Yep.
So I read all the books. I signed up for two antenatal courses.
Wow, two.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, there's a standard NHS one that you had access to, and then there's
Oh yeah.
NCT as well. So I think probably a lot of people do that, don't they? I even did, there's like a natal hypnotherapy course, so I did that as well. So I kind of thought, I want to be as prepared as I possibly can. Um, and it's like, I suppose, I'm a careers advisor, obviously, and I thought of it in terms of, having a job description and a person specification for parenting.
Okay.
It's like, well,
Really a real practical approach to this.
yeah, I have a very logical brain,
Yep.
very logical brain. So I was like, all right, well, let's find out what the job description is, if you like. Read all the books, attend all the courses, and get as much information as I possibly can. So I'm really well prepared. And let's
Yep.
read the person specification to see, what a competent parent looks like, right? A sort of what's the perfect parent. So I thought I had a good handle on that, but obviously. First of all, I'm only really looking at the beginning anyway, sort of the pregnancy and the birth and the first few months or whatever.
Mm.
Um, and then it all unravels. It really all unraveled
How
right from
quickly
the
did it
start.
unravel, Helen? Did it unravel quite quickly for you or over a period of time?
Well, I suppose a bit of both, but
Mm.
but right from the start. So I had a really difficult birth experience.
Okay.
Done all the things, wanted a birthing pool, everything was all planned out. It
Yeah.
didn't go to plan. I know that's the case for a lot of people.
Yeah, I'm there with you
Uh,
on that one.
yeah, right.
Yeah.
Well, I ended up with quite a severe tear, which left me in hospital for a number of days.
Yeah.
Um, and I actually also had a rift with my family, which had a kind of a long-lasting effect
Oh
afterwards.
wow.
But during the time that I was in hospital, all my plans for breastfeeding, which I was absolutely determined I was going to do, went out the window because I couldn't sit. So because I had such a severe tear, I was only able to lie down. I was still trying to breastfeed, but I couldn't figure out how to do it lying down because I'd never learned how to do that. And
Yeah.
then I had these people coming in, all around the clock, coming into my hospital room and telling me to do this now, do this now. So I was on a sort of a 3 hour schedule where I would be trying to breastfeed and it wasn't working. I would be trying to express, and I've been trying to shown how to do that. I'd never done that before. Um, and then I was having to bottle feed. I was expected to do it all myself with
Yeah.
little tuition. And all that preparation that I'd done just went out the window. So straight away, I was not the perfect parent as far as I was concerned. It all went to pot. And I also felt like my agency as a parent was taken away. And I think this is a theme
Ah,
that sort of, is a common parental experience of that
yeah.
kind of agency and figuring out who you are as a parent, who you want to be, and that control is taken away from you.
Yeah.
I actually have a little bit of trauma associated with that period,
Mm.
because it just didn't, it didn't go to plan,
Yeah.
wasn't what I wanted. I felt like I wasn't doing a good job. Um,
And that's really
yeah.
emotional still for you. I can really see
Yeah.
that. Yeah, that's really hard. I think, like you say, I think when we have those kind of early starts, and like you said, you go away and you get told there's all the books, and how do I start with that? And
Yeah.
what do I need to know? And you research. I remember watching, oh, do you remember the program One Born Every Minute?
Oh yeah.
I was obsessed with that. And
Yeah.
my partner at the time, my boy's dad, was like, "Why are you watching that?" But I would watch it, and there'd be all these problems going on. I'd be like, "Oh my God, I can't watch this."
Yeah, that's true.
Every week would tune in
Yeah.
because I needed to know all the information of what could possibly happen.
Yeah, that control, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And then, of course, like a bit like you, ended up in. I had my birth plan. Yeah, that went straight out the window, and we ended up with an emergency C-section and all sorts of stuff.
Yeah, yeah,
And a bit like you, a really, really traumatic start to parenting.
yeah,
And that has a huge impact on us. And you have this idea of being a perfect parent. And what do you mean? I've done all this research and now it's not going according to plan. And then welcome to the
yeah,
world of being a parent because nothing ever goes
yeah.
to plan, does it?
That's it.
So that's really hard. So you had a really tricky start
Yeah,
being a parent with kind of like control being taken away from you and changes and unexpected things. And I suppose that possibly as well might tie in for you around diagnoses as well for you that you didn't know at that time.
yeah. I think
Mm.
that's it. Yeah. So, I mean, that's the start of it. And then things were very difficult in those first few years as well. But I really didn't have very much idea about, you know, ADHD, autism. I didn't know. I just knew that what seemed to happen for me, I think, is that, I'm very close to a couple of um, other mums on the NCT antenatal class that I went on.
Yeah.
And you're having the same sorts of conversations. We're texting each other at 3 a.m. in the first few months of like, oh, this is happening and that's happening, and it's all the same. And there's just this sense that you're all in it together. And um, it's hard, and you're talking about how hard it is. But then at some point, it changes where they're starting to talk about other things. Life's moved on a bit, things have got a little bit easier for them.
Yeah.
Um, and you're wondering why it's still hard for you, thinking, is it my fault that it's still so hard? Why am I making it so difficult? Why is my child still not sleeping? Why are they having challenges eating? Why are they having these kind of sensory challenges where I'm buying, I don't know, age 4, like 5 different pairs of shoes, right? And none of them are right, and they've all got to go back. So,
You were
all of
starting
that
to pick up
thing.
these differences going along that actually, like you said,
Differences coming,
they
yeah,
were
they're
kind
not
of
quite.
going off on a different angle almost to you, and you were kind of either staying where you were or going off on a different tangent.
I didn't really know um, what my role was as a parent, or if I was doing a good job. I felt like I didn't have any measure anymore of that. When things really came to a head for us as a family
Mm.
was during the first lockdown. So
Okay.
I noticed differences with my youngest, and he was having challenges in school. But when we got into that first lockdown, I think, that was a big turning point for a lot of families, wasn't it?
It certainly was.
Yeah.
Some of us are still recovering.
Well, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. Um, so I was trying to juggle my job as a university careers advisor. So I've been at University of Manchester for a really long time, working there as a careers advisor. I've done pretty well. Everything had, has gone well.
Mm.
But then during the first lockdown, um, I was trying to homeschool both children. At the time, they were in year 1 and year 3. So
Yeah.
my boys are now in year 6 and year 8. And my youngest started having, he was having a lot of difficulties. It was just suddenly, a lot more obvious to me
Mm.
um, that he was just really struggling to engage with the home learning. Um, and I was struggling as well. I was really struggling to manage work because work had been shifted to the evenings. So I was trying to homeschool during the day, and then in the evenings I was trying to I was getting on Zoom calls, talking to university students, doing, one-to-one careers guidance up until like 9 o'clock at night. And then
It was
getting up,
it was a huge amount of pressure, wasn't it, in that time, I think, when
yeah,
some of us were furloughed,
yeah,
some of us lost jobs,
yeah, absolutely.
and some of us were trying to build work round the kids and now had taken on this teaching role we
Yes.
had never anticipated and never wanted to
Really.
take on.
No.
Um, and now trying to occupy kids with us, it was like the longest summer holidays ever, but now
Yeah.
I've got to do work with them as well.
Yeah, yeah. And that's the funny thing because I think, um, obviously at the time, my son didn't have any diagnosis at all.
Okay.
Now it's kind of obvious to me that that sort of very, very structured home learning, which it became, where I was then having to mediate as a parent what was coming down from the school of, this work had to be done and this live session had to be attended, and my child had to sit on the sofa and, watch the teacher and respond, but not interrupt, and all of these things. And I was sort of being expected to pass that pressure on was really, really hard.
Mm, mm.
And then, yeah, trying to be that professional as well at
Yeah.
work. So I ended up burning out and I didn't know it at the time. I didn't know that's what it was. I thought it was anxiety. I was also, little did I know, I was also in perimenopause. Um,
You've got to love that too, haven't you? That always
yeah,
it throws
it
you in a
really
curveball. Just when you think you've got it sussed and planned, then the hormones kick in.
absolutely such a
Yeah.
beautiful thing,
Yeah.
especially when it clashes with ADHD, which I also didn't know that I had. Was only diagnosed with that 2 years ago. So yeah, there was a lot going on and a lot of, my job was quite pressured. And I have to admit, I was a bit envious of those people that had been furloughed.
Mm-mm.
Whereas I was thinking, what am I doing, on Zoom until 9 p.m. and
Yeah.
then writing, my reports afterwards until like late in the night and then getting up and having to get everybody breakfast and do get into the home learning routine. The wheels fell off basically at that time for me personally as a parent,
Mm.
as an employee, and also for, my son really,
Yeah.
was really struggling.
Yeah.
So I then went into a period of um, kind of exploring that flexible working landscape really, because
Yeah.
when he did, or when both of them went back into school, he was still really struggling.
Okay.
So that struggle continued, and I needed to find something that was kind of flexible around
Mm.
that. So I did lots of, work-wise, I did lots of different things. So I I went on some freelancer platforms and I did, I did I wrote CVs and I did practice interviews and careers guidance for people all around the world. And that was really nice. It was really flexible. It wasn't well paid enough,
Mhm.
but it was really flexible. It gave me that flexibility that I needed when my son couldn't be in school. And I just decided this was a period where I needed to really prioritize family.
But I suppose
Um,
as well, you still got that juggle underneath with the kids
yeah,
and at this point, so tell us a bit about your kind of family setup. And you don't have to go into too much detail, Helen, but
yeah,
kind of what diagnoses have you got rumbling around
yeah,
in your household that kind of add to the picture for
yeah.
people that are listening?
So, my youngest, well, first of all, I'd actually asked for a referral for ADHD because for me that was,
Okay.
those were the signs that I was seeing
And that came
particularly.
off the back of the lockdown.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
when it started, but
Okay.
it took a really long time to go through.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, one thing was when I first raised it with school, um, and the school didn't have a Senko at the time. So I was in a meeting with the head, and what came back to me was it's just anxiety. So there wasn't an acceptance that ADHD should be something they should be looking at.
Okay.
And then the next thing that came back to me was maybe you want to try and go on a parenting course. I didn't know that was a thing, Liz. I didn't know until I went on lots of Facebook groups and I saw people coming up saying, oh, yeah, this thing, go on a parenting course. So, since then, I've realized that a lot gets put back on you.
As a parent,
Even
yeah.
quite recently,
Yeah.
we've had a meeting where I went into a meeting in school where there were a lot of different adjustments that I wanted to be made in school to accommodate my son, things that I was asking the school to do to support him. Um, and what came back is what's going on at home in the morning so that he's not wanting to come into school. So,
Okay. So that
they wanted
pushback to it's got to be something that's happening at home. It can't possibly
got
be
to be
something
something
that's
that's
happening at
happening at
school.
home. And then the answer is, oh, I've got a great idea. What about a visual timetable? I also know that that's another thing that comes up quite a lot is a visual timetable. I'm not saying that can't be useful, but I just feel like that deflection, of coming back on what's going on at home and what's the parent
Mm.
doing. And because I think, and for me personally, as somebody with, my own diagnosis of ADHD, and I know that I'm highly sensitive, as a
Yeah,
lot of us are, we judge ourselves already quite a lot, don't we? And
absolutely.
sometimes when we get that judgment coming at us from other people who are professionals,
Mm.
it makes us feel like actually our own judgment of ourselves has some validity,
Yeah,
So
yeah,
maybe, yes, we are doing something wrong. Maybe we do need to go on a parenting course, right?
yeah. And it's really hard, I think, because I think, when I've worked with lots of schools, and actually my parents are both ex-teachers. They were both head teachers and teachers. So kind of education's been around in my family for a while. And I do wonder whether there is something in there around the school can't look for help until they have done X, Y, Z. So they still have a lot of pressure on them to show that they have done so much stuff for the children before they can go on to the next step. So they
Yeah,
kind of get almost, I sometimes feel that the schools get stuck in between
yeah,
health, local authorities, and the parents, with the
yeah,
kids kind of stuck in the middle, and the parent and the school kind of going, well, we've kind of got to produce all this evidence. So I've now got to suggest you go on a parenting course. I've now got to suggest that you've got a visual timetable. And now, all those
yeah,
bits they have to do. Um, so that's really hard too. Is that they're kind of having to produce all this evidence, and it's almost like have to go through this tick box
yeah,
exercise, which is what happens when you end up in big core, big structures like we've got, is you have to tick a box to get to the next step. I always
yeah,
think it's a bit like a computer game. You have to pass this
yeah,
level and then you get to the
yeah,
next level. And sometimes you're just kind of playing the game until you get to the next level.
yeah,
And there's an acknowledgement, I think, sometimes even with the professionals that they know we have to just go through this process to get to
yeah.
the next step.
It's
But
true.
as you say, the impact
Mm,
that has on us as parents
yeah,
when we are always, even, I don't have a diagnosis of ADHD, but again, I totally resonate with what you're saying is that
mm,
feeling of it must be me. I'm doing something wrong. And we give ourselves a hard enough time as it is as parents.
yeah,
That guilt thing that sits there and the shame and
yeah.
we do a good job of that on our own, thanks.
Absolutely,
We don't need you to
absolutely.
add to it.
No,
That's
no.
really hard.
And I've had my own experience of working in schools. So when I was, exploring that flexible work landscape and had left universities where I've been working as a careers advisor for 20 years, a long time. Um, one of the things that I did is I started working for a careers agency in schools, and I've now worked in, I think it's 8 different secondary schools,
Mm.
mainstream, specialist, pupil referral unit as well. And one of the things there that I think was really interesting is I started to kind of learn a lot more about the experiences of young people with additional needs, neurodivergent young people. Especially I was working with students mainly in years 10 and 11 as well. So they're thinking about their next steps after school. And also working with the wider families as well. So, I mean, one thing a lot of people don't know is every young person is entitled to a one-to-one careers guidance appointment with a careers professional. Um, and so I would go into schools and I'd have on my list, the names of every single student, say in year 11.
Yeah.
And I would literally have to go through and pull students out of classes to see them because it was their, it was their right to have that. So I would pull them out of classes teachers didn't like very much. And I'd try to say, this is important, this is a young person's right. And I would have conversations with young people and I'd find out a lot about what was going, what was going on for them and how they were not necessarily always being supported. A lot of them were having obviously had unmet needs there. The
Mm.
biggest thing for me was when I would get to students who were not regularly attending, and there was different levels of sympathy within the school for that, and there was a lot of talk of school refusers, which kind of really upset me because I had my own son who was struggling in school. And I really, at the time, I didn't know, I suppose, how sort of toxic that term was, but it didn't sit well with me. So for those students, they're often neglected. They're often just forgotten about in terms of career support, which they really, really need. But I would make sure that I would call home for those students. So I would often then have conversations with other parents
Okay.
of students who were struggling in
Mm,
school.
mm.
And I'll never forget this one call that I had with a parent where um, so I'd managed to speak to the parent the week before and said, let's say Joshua, I don't know, I know Joshua's not been in school for about 6 months, but I am an external careers advisor. I'm here to support. I have to say that, for that parent, initially, she probably have been quite suspicious of me. It's another call from school,
Yep.
what does this person want? This is a school calling again. They're probably going to be, trying to get me to do this, trying to get me to do that, judging me. So I wanted to say, I'm here to support you and your son, and help him think about his next steps after school. And it's a chance for him to, to actually have some choices, about his next steps. And anyway, I managed to have a telephone conversation with Joshua. And it was really, really positive. I was able to say, what you can do after school in terms of your college options. You've got some choices. It's the first time really when you've got some choices for
Yeah.
yourself. And he had a great plan after that. But I came back the next week. I noticed that the college that we were discussing had an open day the following day. So I sent an email to the parents saying it would be fantastic if Joshua could go along to this open day, but I'd appreciate that he might need support in attending it. So I don't know if you're able to take him. And then I thought, maybe she doesn't check her emails very regularly. I'll just give her a quick call. And it's probably a bit ADHD, but I thought I'll just give her a quick call. So anyway, I called her and I started saying, oh, really had such a great chat with Joshua. And, I don't know if he's told you and he's looking forward to doing this course next year. And there's an open day tomorrow, and it would be fantastic if you could take him. And she said, um, let me just stop you there, Helen. I said, tomorrow I've got to, sorry, I'm getting emotional again because this is
Wow.
hard.
Okay.
She said, I've got to be in court, um, because, you know, um, basically for her son's school attendance, she had to have a court appearance. So she was in burnout and she hadn't been able to work. She'd had to leave her job. Um, she was,
I'm going to get you to take a minute, Helen. There'll be a lot of parents out there that this hits home with.
yeah.
And even just me listening to you talk, I've got goosebumps with you talking. I've
Oh,
also got a child that didn't, was really struggling with
yeah,
school and is now educated at home. So I want you to be able to tell your story.
yeah,
But I also know I can see how this is upsetting you. So I just want to check that you are okay
I'm
to
fine.
continue. I don't want you to continue with something that is going to leave you feeling horrible. There'll be people listening that will go, "Do you know what? we can't just come on here and go and be robots and not have emotions to this stuff because it's related to our kids and the job that we do. And I just want to reassure that if we leave this bit in, that people are, I've got Helen, and
Yeah. Yeah. So after that, I really, it just hit home. I think I'd heard about, obviously school fines. I knew about that. I knew all about that. And I had heard that there was a possibility, I thought it was a theoretical possibility that a parent could be taken to court for
yeah,
non-school attendance. But to actually hear a parent say that to me, I was quite shocked, I have to admit. I was quite shocked and it hit me. And I had quite a few conversations in this particular school with parents that I felt almost as a professional in the school. Okay, I was external, I wasn't working for the school,
mm,
but I felt like, I was probably on the edge of what I should have been doing there, having those conversations. Because for me, I was completely on that parent side. I was just, my justice sensitivity
yeah.
was like up here, it was really very activated. I was, I wanted to do something about that. I didn't think that was right.
And at this time, Helen, was there still the issues going on at home? So was this at this point your son is
Yeah.
also struggling?
My
So
child is
now
struggling.
there's
Yeah, my
both
child.
going on. Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And also the fact that I was working with, so the students I was working with professionally were in
Mm,
year 10, year 11, so 15, 16-year-olds. My own child was in sort of year 3, year 4 at the time when I was working, year 5 as well, when I was working in high schools. So for me, it was almost like looking at the future.
mm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
I
yeah.
actually felt like this is where things could go for me.
And that must have been quite scary,
Yeah,
actually, as a
yeah.
parent, to be sitting there thinking, whoa, I could end up, this is where we could end up.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And then I worked in other schools as well. So I worked in, pupil referral unit where, it was very small, it was very supportive. And there were a lot of students there that I felt like had been sort of let down by the system, really. They were undiagnosed, neurodivergent.
Mm,
So many of them
mm,
had fallen out of the system. And I spoke to a lot of parents there. I worked in another school where I was working with students who had just with students that had an EHCP, 30 students in the whole school with an EHCP. And I would have family meetings. My role was to help them to find the right post 16 option. So,
okay.
education, training.
Yeah.
I got very much into the advocacy there, which again was sort of slightly on the edge of what my role really should have been. But
Mm,
I got very involved in calling the local authority, calling colleges, advocating on
mm,
behalf of my students.
mm.
I have sitting in meetings with parents where I insisted on an interpreter because English wasn't their first language, but they'd never had an interpreter before,
Okay.
where they should have had,
Yeah,
So
yeah.
again, the sort of justice sensitivity of me making sure it wasn't enough for me to just
Mm,
say, well, these are your options. You go and sort it out.
yeah. So
Because
Helen,
I felt like there wasn't enough support, really. There just
yeah,
wasn't enough support.
because I suppose that kind of leads me on to then, where is this where your new kind of business has come from? Because I suppose I'm really interested to think about how you've got to where you are now. Because the job
Yeah.
that you do now is supporting parents in neurodivergent families to find, see if I remembered your slogan, to find work that works.
Yeah.
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 So where
Yeah.
did
So
that come from? What, because I can kind of see the links almost in here now, building as you're talking, that what was happening for you as a parent, and you went through that burnout and
yeah.
trying to juggle work and home life and the additional needs that our kids might have.
Yeah.
Then you're starting to work with the kids, but now the parents are coming into this, and I can hear
Yeah.
you talking about the parents in the
Yeah.
background. And
Yeah.
now knowing what I know you do, I'm kind of
Yeah.
thinking, oh, I can see where Helen might have come from for this.
This is it. This is it. Well, I suppose I just realised, like, talking to that parent who was attending court and who had had to give up her job. It just and like you said, in my own experience of having to take voluntary redundancy, I was very, in 2020, I was very lucky that that came up for me, that I was able to take that and I was able to then spend some time exploring, flexible work. I just felt like, children experiencing a lot of difficulties. But if the parent, everything falls on that parent. If that parent is not okay, then nothing is okay in that family.
Mm.
So for me, it just made sense for me to be able to offer that
Yeah.
because I've got a careers background, I have those
Yeah.
skills and that experience. And I've had my own experience of raising, a family with additional needs.
Mm.
Neurodivergences in the mix, my own neurodivergence, a lot of these things that other parents are dealing with.
Mm.
I just thought there is a real opportunity and a need here to help the parents, and nobody seemed to be doing that.
Mm.
There didn't seem to be anybody out there. Though it's got a lot of support for young people, actually, because young people do have that right to one-to-one career
Yeah.
support. But there isn't very much out there for the parents.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I found is that there isn't, it's very, very hard for parents to find work that is flexible enough to meet their needs. And the traditional career coaches out there, they really just don't quite understand the situation of a family, a parent
And
with
the
children with
polls
additional
that you
needs.
get, in all sorts of different directions. And I know, on your Facebook page and on your LinkedIn, you talk a lot about what's happening in the government at the moment and all that
Yeah,
kind of stuff that
yeah,
has huge impact on parents. And actually, there may well be parents out there that have got kids with additional needs and they want to work.
yes,
And then there's no kind of, and I feel quite strongly in this, is that there are some parents that feel that they want to be at home with their children and that is okay.
yeah,
But there are also equally parents out there that still want to be able to work. It gives them something back. And,
yeah,
I was listening to Sarah Davis talk on a podcast. And I don't, as far as I know, I don't think she's got kids with additional needs. But she was talking about actually she was okay with making the decision that she worked as much as she did because work gave her something. It gave her something that she wanted and she needed. And it was really interesting to hear that because I think
yeah,
sometimes stereotypically as mothers, we are in the caring role, stereotypically. And that can be a pressure that we can feel very guilty about wanting to be able to work.
yeah.
And then we've got the government saying, well, you need to be out there working and putting a lot of pressure on. And I was thinking, well, we would if we could.
Yeah, exactly.
And I
Exactly.
know you feel very strongly about
I
that.
do feel very
Yeah.
strongly about that. I mean, because in thinking about this podcast, I just wrote down all the
Yeah.
barriers and challenges that the people I work with, the parents I work with, face really when they're trying to manage work alongside parenting, alongside trying to make sure that their needs are supported by school or by the local authority, and all of that,
What were
and
those
trying to
barriers
justify
that
what they're doing.
what were the barriers you came up with, Helen? I'd be really interested.
Oh, right. Well,
Because
so
I'm
I mean,
sure they're going to
it's
resonate with people.
yeah. I'm going to try and run through these quickly, and then we could dig into one or two
Yeah.
of them maybe. But there's first of all, it's like, and this is something I really experienced as well, is the unpredictability of family life.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
managing that alongside trying to work. So, last week, I spoke to a parent and she said that her son, who's undiagnosed ADHD, had been suspended 100 times during his time at school. And so, suspended, sent home, and unfortunately, she's got a relatively flexible job, but her job is being stretched to the
Yeah.
limit.
Yeah.
And, you know, the kind of level of flexibility that the parents I work with need, that there aren't enough jobs out there. Not saying there aren't, and I really
Yeah.
work very, very hard to uncover those, but only 13% of jobs, for example, are fully remote.
Yeah.
The kind of asynchronous hours that people need where
Hmm.
deal with that unpredictability. So where, you don't know how your day is going to go, you don't know if your child's going to be in school, or, your tutor is going to be off sick and you have to pick up that. There aren't many employers that will work around that necessarily. Obviously, then people experience financial difficulties. I work with a lot of single parents, might be surviving on precarious or meager benefits, which is why I feel so strongly about things like the cuts of
Yep.
PIP. People have had a long career break. So I work with a lot of parents that have had career breaks of 10 years or more because they haven't been able to work.
Yeah,
They've needed to stop working to fit around their family. And now they're trying to get in, they're experiencing a whole load of other barriers. So confidence drops. They feel like their skills might be out of date. They think an
yeah,
employer is not going to look at them as soon as they, see career break on their CV.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, so that confidence side of it. Some of them have been diagnosed themselves with ADHD or autism since they were last in work. And so
Hmm.
they're seeing that experience of work in a new light.
Yeah,
So they're seeing that and thinking, now if I go back to the workplace, are they going to accommodate my
yeah.
ADHD? I
How
can
do I
see
fit
why I
in
was
with that?
struggling. Yeah. So
Yeah.
there's their own neurodivergence, as well as thinking about whether work's going to be flexible enough. They don't know where they stand necessarily with the law as well. Um, so yeah, I think probably that's probably not all of them, but there's so many challenges really. And the identity thing is a big one. It absolutely is. Because I think you do you can forget who you are. And you can't go back to a former self either. If you've had a career break, you're not that person anymore.
Mm. And even
Um,
just being a parent, I think changes you, doesn't it?
yeah,
That
absolutely.
you can't go back to how you were before. You make decisions in a very different way. You might act in a different way. You might be in a different way. Work might look different.
Yeah.
Everything changes,
Yeah.
doesn't it? And
And there are
sometimes for the positive. It's not always for the worse, but
yeah.
big changes.
Definitely, and there's evidence, isn't there, that actually there's neural pathways do shift, don't
Mhm.
they?
Yep, with
Um,
neuroplasticity.
Neuroplasticity. And actually, it brings me on to something kind of quite interesting, I think, is that often parents overlook the skills that they develop through parenting and through sort of, fighting the system as well, and just trying to get their, child support
Absolutely.
needs
It's like a whole
met.
job in itself. And
It's a
like you
whole
say, the
job.
skill set that
Yes,
takes from
exactly.
parents is huge
It
that could
really
be
is.
transferable into a job.
It really is transferable. So things like, yeah, let's talk about them because actually, a lot of people are not necessarily aware of them or not necessarily aware that that's something that is transferable.
Mm.
So, things like all the research you do. How many times have you gone down that rabbit hole looking at government policies, what's kind of case law on this, that, and the other, just trying to figure out what your rights are, what your child's rights are. That kind of critical thinking, analysis, independent decision making, all the advocacy
Yeah.
and negotiation and the communication skills where you are sitting in a meeting and thinking about what the right thing to say is and, how to get somebody on side, the negotiation, the resilience and the persistence as well when you are, chasing up referrals over and over and over again, and you've got all these doors being slammed in your face, and you've just got to keep coming back and picking yourself up and carrying on.
Mm.
Just navigating all those setbacks. There's so many things, and I think, it's it's challenging sometimes to get all that down and think about, well, how can I translate that into something which could be useful for an employer.
I suppose that's really useful, isn't it, then to have somebody else? Because notoriously, unless you're very, very, you know, out there and very confident in yourself, we are we find it particularly difficult to say I am good at. And I wonder whether some of that's being very British in our style, that we don't brag about things. That's not appropriate. We don't talk about how good we are about things. Um, and that's really difficult because even if you haven't got extra additional needs, that when you have to do your job application stuff like that and you're having to write about how great you are and what you do, it's really hard, whereas someone else often can help you do that. And I suppose that's part of your role, is to help those parents think about those skills that they do have and being able to kind of pull those skills out for them.
Yeah, that's it. And the confidence that goes along with that, really as well. Because I think sometimes people do think that, um, and employers can sometimes think it as well, that employers have to be shown why this is valuable. But a lot of people think, I've had this career break. and haven't
Yeah.
been doing
Done,
anything
I've done nothing.
useful in
Yeah.
that time. And that's so
Yeah.
wrong, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's so wrong.
Yeah.
So actually just having the confidence to say, hey, look at all these amazing things that I've been doing as I've been parenting, as I've been advocating for my child,
Mm.
even if they've not done anything else, like volunteering but a lot of people do lots of volunteering as well. Running groups, running communities, or, being actively involved, um, possibly with the school or doing different things. But just the parenting and just going through, you know, getting their child support needs met
Mm.
there's so much there. There's so
Yeah.
much there.
And that might not be something that parents would typically think they could draw on. Like you
No,
said, that they would think that that time away from work in a purely parenting role is kind of like this, it's not relevant to my work or to a job. But actually, you're saying there's quite a lot in there. There's skills in there that are transferable, but we might not necessarily know that.
that's it. And I think, it's like you don't stop developing skills just because you
No.
stop being in formal work. And, when you talk about the skills that you develop, they come from all areas of life all the time. Even if you weren't a parent, even before you were a parent, you're still developing skills. If you're a student and you're staying in rental accommodation and you need a new washing machine, you've got to negotiate that with your landlord. That's a skill.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily drawn from work. And I think we can think about work in a very narrow way. And I always look at life very holistically in the
Yeah.
way that I work with parents and say, all of these things that you're doing in every area of life is very valuable. Let's pull all that together
Yeah.
and make sure that we make a sort of, persuasive case to employers that this is really important, it's really
Yeah.
valuable.
I'm just thinking, Helen, if you were to go back to your younger self, so when you were a younger parent, and maybe around that time when things were quite tricky with, things being difficult, maybe for the kids and balancing their needs and balancing you not knowing that you had a diagnosis in there as well, and you were juggling work and actually ended up in burnout. What advice would you go back and give to yourself at that point when things got really tricky between juggling, work, parenting, lifing?
Mhm. Yeah. I think it probably there's a few things. One is definitely let go of some of that perfectionism because you have to
Mm.
accept that you're going to drop
Yeah,
some balls.
yeah,
And actually, that might be quite painful to drop the balls, especially if you think that those things that you're dropping are actually quite important, So it might be related to work, or it might be, you don't meet a deadline that you should be meeting in
yeah,
terms of really hard stuff like the send paperwork. You didn't get it done on time because you just had too much going on. So forgive yourself is the
yeah,
first one. Um, and I will say that you have to really be a bit thick-skinned. And I
yeah,
can't say that I've got that perfectly right. I can't say because I'm not thick-skinned, let's face it. I'm ADHD, I cry easily. I'm not thick-skinned. And to be honest, I don't really want to be. But at the same time, I think just letting go of the judgment from other people and being more confident, which has taken me a lot of time to be more confident in myself
mm,
as a parent. And going back to that person specification idea, I
yeah.
suppose, like, build your own person specification. The job description, in any case, is going
I
to
love that.
change, right, as you go through. Because I now have
Yeah.
a teenager, and regardless of the neurodivergence, I have a teenager,
Yeah,
and
I've
they've
got one
got
of them. I've got
hormones.
two of them.
Yeah, there you go. Hormones and relationships and all of
Yeah,
that stuff going
yeah,
on. So just yeah, be confident in your own voice, your own path, your own way.
yeah. How did how do you do that, Helen? Have you had the kind of strategies that you use to do that? Because people might think, yeah, I know that's what I need to do, but how did you do that? Like for me, it's having like a really good support system around me that I can sense check against people. So I can go, oh my God, I've got to go do this, I've got to do that, and, and then they go, right, hang on a minute. No, you don't. And they just check me.
Yeah.
And I need that at times when I'm a solo parent and I'm doing it on my own and my son's been out of school and we've been through EHCPs and tribunals and work and juggling it all.
Yeah.
But I had to find kind of external supports to be able to help me with that. And some of that was finding really great communities to be part of with other parents that I could go, "Ugh," and then go, actually, you can drop that bit. Because sometimes we almost need the permission to drop it, don't we?
Yeah. Yeah.
Is there anything
I,
you
I
found helpful?
communities yeah, communities have been very important for me as well, definitely. And you know, I wouldn't have been out without the Facebook communities that I'm in. I'm in a few that are really important. I'm in daily, really,
Yeah,
connecting with people. Obviously, people in real life are very important as well. I am lucky that I do have a supportive family.
yeah.
Um, so that is very helpful to me. And but the other thing that's been really useful for me is my mindfulness.
Okay.
So I I joined a course called mindfulness-based stress reduction. It's not particularly targeted at, neurodivergent adults or parents with neurodivergent children or anything like that.
Mm.
Um, but it helps you to be more present in the moment, and it just helps me to reduce my anxiety and to learn more to be rather than to always do and fix and question and why and that spiraling.
Yeah.
It's really it's really helped me a lot with avoiding getting into that spiraling that you can do, I think. So that's been really, really helpful.
And if you could give, there'll be parents out there that will be resonating a lot with what you said. The kind of followers of the podcast, I think, are predominantly from families with additional needs. They might have additional needs as a parent themselves, or it might be through the kids. But if you could give them one kind of top tip for a parent that's struggling at the moment, maybe struggling to balance their careers or their work, or the finances around bringing in money and being a parent,
Yeah.
what would your top tip be, Helen?
Yeah. Well, I'm quite a logical person, I think. So I sort of separate it into what you can do this week. So if you're in crisis right now,
Yeah.
everything's falling apart. Maybe your child suddenly just not able to attend school or something. There's some, mental health crisis, I don't know, lots of different things. And you are trying to work. Look at what you can do now to fix that. So, for example, with work, obviously that's my area, you can get emergency leave for dependents. Some people don't even know that you can have
I
access to
didn't know that.
know that.
No.
Yeah, so and there's not a specific limit for how many days that you can take, but it is designed for unforeseen circumstances. So it's
Okay.
perfect for that situation where you're in crisis and you just need to release that pressure valve.
Mm,
So obviously you have to be reasonable about what you can take, and generally it's unpaid. Although I would say check your employment contracts because sometimes employers do pay
yeah.
for a certain number of, kind of special leave days. But it's a right. So you can look it up, emergency leave for dependents. But so think about this week, maybe think about, in the next month, what can you change in the next month? So if you're out of crisis, but you do need, I don't know, maybe you just need a regular income, or what you've got right now isn't
Mm,
working, or you
mm,
don't have anything. What can you do in terms of short-term work and separating that from longer term plans?
mm,
So if you perhaps need a complete change of career, or you need to make some big changes, just recognizing that that might take a little bit longer. And so I like to talk about parallel paths and running things in parallel. So you can do something now to get yourself out of crisis,
yeah.
but keeping that separate from maybe making a long-term plan. Because I have ADHD, everything, my executive function, everything tends to get in a muddle in my head.
Yep.
So I'm like, I need to make a career change, but my child isn't attending school right now. And what do I need to do today? I need to, email the Senko, but I also need to make a career change. Well, those things are not in the same box, are they? So it's just trying to get some structure around that. And that kind of, I think, helps you bring a sharper focus onto what you really need to be doing right now
Yeah.
versus, but still making some longer term changes, still working towards that.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, of course, get some support. Always get some
Yeah.
support. don't need to do it on your own. And I know for you, Liz, that's a really big thing for you as well, isn't it?
It
So
is, yeah, yeah. The support thing for me is massive, and
yeah,
I've got my. I'm going to show it down. I'm going to show it on camera because it's released today, but this will come out later. But I am going
yeah,
to show it on camera. We're back to front, but I have got my t-shirt on today, which has been
amazing.
released. So I am. There's people will find out about that for the podcast a bit later. But it's been released today.
Very
Um,
exciting.
what that probably leads me on to really nicely is people might have listened to this, Helen, and think, actually, I could really do, and I'd want to reach out and get hold of Helen. And I put all the links in the show notes. So there will be links to Helen and her social sites and all that kind of stuff and emails and whatever to get hold of you. But if people wanted to work with you, Helen, what are you offering at the moment? How can you support people? Because you say I'm big on support and how we support parents. So how can what do you do that supports parents?
Absolutely. So I like to I'm social justice is really important to me,
Mhm.
helping people. I'm very driven by helping people. So I always want to make sure that a certain amount of my time is spent helping people for free.
Yeah.
So I have a couple of free guides. One is Finding Flexible Work, which has a list of flexible job sites. It's got things about your needs and non-negotiables, what's most important for you to think about when you're looking at flexible work.
Yep.
I have a post-career break CV guide, which helps people to think about what kind of CV they need and how they can convey that career break and the skills that they've developed during that time
Mhm.
to employers. So I've got a weekly newsletter where I share lots of tips for parents and carers and neurodivergent and disabled families
Where
on
can people
finding.
find that, Helen? Is that on your website? You've got a website, or is it on just on your
Yeah,
Facebook page
so
or anything?
I have a links page,
Yeah.
which obviously you can share in the show notes. I
Yeah.
offer one-to-one careers guidance support as well. And I also have a free Zoom call, which is my Work That Works Q&A, which I run every month, which people can come along to,
Yeah.
meet
That
other
sounds brilliant.
parents, so actually be part of that community. And I'm also thinking about something else, which depending on when the podcast comes out, may or may not be running. So people can follow me on LinkedIn, on Facebook. Those are probably the main two platforms that I'm on
Yeah.
as
Okay.
well.
And that's a good way to kind of connect with you. And then we'll get your links page, your URL for that, and we'll pop that on the show notes as well, so people can click on that and
Brilliant,
they can find all the different ways that they can work with you.
brilliant.
That just leaves me to say, Helen, thank you ever so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. I always love a chat with you. It's been lovely having you on. And just thank you very much. And keep an eye out on what Helen's doing. Check out her websites and her pages and her socials where you can keep up to date with what she's doing. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Liz. Thanks for having me on. It's been really great to chat.
You're really welcome. Take care, Helen.
Bye.
Well, that's it for this episode of the Untypical Parent Talks. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. Whether you were walking the dog, folding laundry, or just hiding in the toilet for 5 minutes peace, and there's no judgment here. I'm glad you chose to spend your time with me today. If you're a parent or a carer of a child with additional needs and you're feeling overwhelmed, burnt out, or just like you need a better backup, I've got you and I'm here to help you find a way through the tricky stuff. Like the moments when you feel like you might just run out of steam, so that you can be the parent that you want to be and take care of yourself too. If you want to connect, you can find me on all the social media sites, Facebook, Instagram and LinkedIn, where I share more tips, resources and real talk. And hey, if this episode made you laugh out loud or feel a little less alone, why not buy me a coffee? Just click the link in the show notes. It's a small way to show your support and keep this podcast going. Take care of yourself today. You're doing an amazing job.